Hello, and welcome back to the Creative Resistance Podcast. I'm your host, head honcho and general dog's body, Scott Cassidy. Now, our guest for today's episode, someone whose work doesn't just ask you to listen, it forces you to stop, think, and take note. Victoria McNulty is an award-winning poet and writer whose words give life to the people of Glasgow, past and present. Whether she's documenting the characters that cut about modern-day Scotland in her collections, Confessionals and Exiles, or serving as the Writer of the Year at the Scots Language Awards, Victoria has a gift for capturing the beautiful in the mundane and seen through the bluster that we all bring to our lives. In this episode, we roam far. We explore the domestic as political, we talk about growing up in a house where chatting politics and trade unionism was the norm, the radical influence of early 2000s rap and spoken word, the Pogues, and the controversial reality of challenging Scotland's most sacred icons. From the gentrification of Glasgow's skyline to the Weinsteinian side of Robert Burns, Victoria doesn't pull any punches, and it was such a privilege to sit down, pick her brains, and have this conversation. I hope you enjoy. Very warm welcome to the Creative Resistance Podcast of Victoria McNulty. How are you, pal?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. As seems to be the way on these episodes, I seem to be on the opposite side of the country from most of my guests. So I'm just outside of Edinburgh. Just for the listeners, where are you?
Glasgow.
Glasgow. Whereabouts in Glasgow are you?
I'm in Carntine at the moment. Okay. So the East End.
East End, nice. Oh well, very welcome. It's a glorious sunny day through here, so hopefully you've got the same. Definitely. Thank you so much for doing this. I've loved your poetry for ages. I love the stuff you put out on social media and your Substack and just your kind of general thoughts. It always, when I'm reading your stuff, it always makes me stop to think. And I think I messaged you recently. There's a post you put up that completely made me stop in my tracks. And I realised that I was operating entirely from inside an echo chamber and just I was kind of caught up in the momentum of that. So sometimes it takes someone like yourself to just say, hang on a minute, have you thought about it this way? So huge thanks. Hopefully we can dive into some of that stuff today. But before we do, I'm really interested in people who are creative generally and creative process. But that all starts with sort of early creativity. So I'd love to know a bit more about your kind of, I don't know, creative origin story, so to speak. Like, what are your earliest memories of making up stories or being creative?
So I used to, I've always kind of made up stories and kind of, I've enjoyed creative writing and things at school and stuff, but I was into visual art. Like I drew and painted a lot when I was younger. I wasn't a big reader. I actually don't think I started reading a lot until I went to uni, which was a total shock to the system, to be honest. But in our house, like, my mum had like sort of 60s compilation records, which they were just fantastic, all these kind of girl groups and stuff like that. My aunt was, my aunt was into great music, like Simple Minds and U2 and the Stone Roses and like really bold sort of social commentary and guitar bands. I think that was kind of always around. So as I kind of got older, I was like a teenage alt kid. I loved like early Green Day, Bikini Kill, that kind of thing, a lot of Britpop. But then I started to get into like things like the Streets. I loved the Streets. It's probably the first spoken word thing that I really...
That first album by the Streets is mind-blowing, isn't it? I didn't get it at the time, I'll be honest. See, like, when it first came out, I was like, what is this? What was it called? Original Pirate Material, wasn't it? Yeah, and I was like, what is this? I was like fully in just indie land at that point. And then as time's gone on, I've listened back to it. It's phenomenal.
So good. Like at that point, I was like studying and I was working in nightclubs and I was going out like 3, maybe even 4 times a week. It was awful. But I really felt like it described my life and my friends in a lot of ways. And yeah, I loved it. The Clash as well. That was probably where the sort of political bent came from. And that sort of the critique that Joe Strummer kind of threw out. The Pogues as well for just the Irish heritage stuff and sort of like talking from that kind of immigrant experience as opposed to with inside Ireland. Any kind of folk music I'd heard before then was like, it was like the Dubliners and things like that. It was excellent. Do you know, it was really, really good. But it wasn't talking about what it felt to know actually be Irish. Do you know, like,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
that kind of double negative, what it's like to not be Irish.
yeah, that kind of exclusion and the romanticising of something that you can't really touch, and I really loved it. So it was music, I think, for me that taught me that I could tell stories, and I didn't have to be in a certain form or like trained in a certain way. That just if I had the words, it would be enough.
Yeah. And was your house political, or was it just the music within the house that kind of stirred something in you? Like, did you grow up in a kind of, was that kind of stuff spoken about, you know, that kind of immigrant experience and the kind of Irish history?
So I thought quite a lot about this because I didn't feel like my house was political till I started being politically active myself, and then I realised that a lot of people that I knew maybe got into politics via university, but like we just talked about it in the house. So my whole family was like red Labour, like socialist Labour, maybe even like communist Labour, like at that. And my mum was like a trade union rep as well, and she was really involved in that as I was younger. So there was always a lot of chat about, you know, sort of workers' rights and women's rights. She worked in a very like women's based role. My gran was very much, you know, women died for your right to vote. You should be thankful for your council house. Don't ever put your name on anything because fascism will come back, which I wish I listened to when she said that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
prophetic there.
yeah. So I think that was kind of around, but it was also around in other people's houses as well. Like I feel like the scheme I grew up in was quite involved in this kind of poll tax stuff and things.
Yeah.
So everybody hated Thatcher, and everybody was kind
It's
of
a unifying thing right there, isn't it?
yeah. So I think I did, but not in a sort of, you know, we're all like revolutionaries sort of way, just in a sort of class conscious way, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's fascinating thinking back to them when it, you know, was part of people's identity to be sort of trade unionists, or it seems to have fallen by the wayside a little bit. And it's amazing how many people are brought up, you know, while speaking on this podcast as well. The other thing that has been brought up loads is a love for the Pogues. It seems that like people, anyone that's like big into words, you know, you mentioned the Pogues there from that kind of, you know, the historic bit about not being Irish and that kind of immigrant viewpoint. You're the first person to bring it up with that, but I think the kind of storytelling that Shane MacGowan has and the way he's able to capture, you know, those feelings in words, I think is just phenomenal. I think I was going to say he's underrated, which seems crazy if you like the Pogues because everyone loves him, but I think generally he's massively underrated as a storyteller.
Sure.
Never mind a songwriter, just phenomenal. Sure. Definitely. So moving on to your work. So I see your poems, following on from what you've said, actually, acting as a kind of social archive for the history of Glasgow, in particular in the East End. And you mentioned there about you originally being into the visual arts, and I know you've done multimedia stuff with music and film as well. So I'm interested if you see poetry or the arts in general as a tool for preserving the history of a community, especially nowadays when we see huge swathes of the city being sort of gentrified. What's your take on the art's role in that?
Oh, see, I had, because obviously I read the questions last night and I had a real think about it. There's a real thing that happens, especially in communities like the one where I grew up, where there's a real focus and a lot of money at the moment to preserve local stories.
Yeah.
The people involved in preserving them are very often not local. And there is in my opinion, like a labour where they come to this community and say, you tell us your stories and we'll archive it, as opposed to doing the research themselves, because we all know these stories because we live there.
Yeah.
So to me, it is about preserving things, but it depends how you do it. So I'm very careful to stay in my lane. I talk about what I know. Like I'm really interested in the miners' strike, for example, but I decided probably not to write about it because I don't understand how that feels to be from that community. So preservation's part of it, but for me, it's just more about not so much when I grew up. Like I remember in school, we got made to watch Kess in English, and we were all like, "He's got a kestrel. What's that?" It's like so removed from our reality. And I think I've always thought there's no really. It's about writing stories that people can relate to, and there's not there's not much in the way of working class art going on in Scotland. And if there is, it's like you've got to very much fit into a certain bracket. There's certain themes that are directed to you. So that was more my motivation. It was like talking to people who would have had a similar experience to me. The whole gentrification thing, I'm at the stage now where I can't decide whether the arts drives it or fights it. Again, I think it's whether it comes from the grassroots or not. There's a fantastic arts club where I grew up called Cranhill Arts. They used to have like a camera club. My aunt was really involved in it, but I went a couple of times. And they used to give these cameras out to like scheme wings and say, bring them back next week. And then you would develop them in their darkroom. And it was like all pictures of like folks' pals in different closes in the park, their dugs.
Amazing.
And all these, and I thought, to me, that's grassroots art. That's like supporting people with the tools they can't access to already tell the stories that they know.
And I love that.
Sorry, something like that is anti-gentrification, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something about that coming full circle from the bit you said at the start about outsiders coming in and saying, yeah, tell us your story. But actually, you're better getting the people who are there to tell their own story and actually, or just have someone pulling it together. And there's some great stuff going on, but it's, like you say, it's really hard to pick out whether it's part of the problem, gentrification. And also I think people's identity change over time as well. It's really difficult. I had a chat with Alan Bissett on here a couple of weeks back, and he was talking about, once you become successful in certain worlds, you're almost seen as too middle class for where you came from, and then you go back and you're too working class to really break through, so you're kind of stuck. And I think there's something about that you said, it has to be done properly, doesn't it? It can't just be almost tokenistic, which I think it sometimes feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can really sort of relate to what he's saying, where I feel, and I love it, like I've always worked in education, I love working in communities, so I'm not complaining about this, but I feel like I'm destined to forever be a community artist. Like that like the other writers maybe do the book festival thing and the tour thing, and they don't, I feel like because you're working class, you're always seen that you have to be socially conscious.
Yes. Do you almost feel like that's a kind of limiting part of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it can be, I think. I mean, it suits me because I still want to teach, so I'm happy to do that. But I'm sure there's people out there that have no bent in doing that. They just want to write. And I don't think they're seen as legitimate in the same way as like other writers.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I mean, there's some amazing folk that I think are doing that very well in Scotland at the moment, but they've definitely seen the exception, don't they?
Yeah.
Thinking of people like is it Graham Armstrong that did the book The Young Team that came out and stuff. There's folk whose books are doing great stuff, but yeah, I'm sure it would be interesting. I'd love to chat to him at some point, because I wonder whether he feels that same kind of thing about being trapped that we've spoken about there. What about tying into what you just said, what about poetry then? Because I know you've described poetry as kind of a working class art form before, but how did you move from a love of visual arts into actually writing and then performing poems?
So poetry first kind of became viable to me. I did Seamus Heaney in English at school, and my mind was just blown. I was like, this is so beautiful, it's political, it's thoughtful. I just loved it. I could also read it. it was the first time I remember understanding the meaning of a poem when I read it. So that is obviously, I think, sat in the back of my head for a long time. I had like been in like bands and sort of musical projects that never really went anywhere. Probably because I don't have any musical talent. It would be a start. But I had books and books of lyrics. When my son was young, I was a single mum. I was kind of isolated. I started going to this open mic in a cafe in Glasgow called the Blue Chair that's not there anymore. And I took my son with me because it's bring your own booze. It was the only place I could go out and not get a babysitter, if you like.
Yeah.
And there was an open mic there on a Wednesday, and there was a lot of poets going through that open mic. And I was just I loved it. It was so DIY. It was just after the independence referendum, so it was all kind of engaged stuff. And I thought, if these people can do this, I can do this. I'm going to try and read some of my lyrics. And it kind of went from there.
Brilliant. Did that feel like a big leap at the time? Or did it feel like quite a natural kind of evolution?
I don't know, because I just felt drawn. I just wanted to do it. Like I didn't feel like I was nervous and things. But I just felt like it was the right thing to do for me at that time.
Brilliant. No, and it obviously was, because you've gone on to do some brilliant things. Interesting what you said about Seamus Heaney. I had a similar. I used to write for ages and stopped for years, and it was Seamus Heaney that kind of tipped me back into writing again. A poem of his called Docker, or The Docker, I can't remember. It's 14 lines, and there's social commentary, there's sectarianism, there's family dynamics. It just blew my mind, that he was able to capture all that. But there's descriptions of a guy sitting having a beer.
Sure.
It's just, brilliant.
Sure.
Definitely. So I read in another interview that you did, Victoria, that you were saying that the domestic is political, which ties into what we said at the start of this conversation about, was your house political or not growing up? You've written some incredible characters. We were speaking before we started recording about confessionals, and I probably love that book that you produced, and especially strong female characters. I'd love to know a bit more about how you use those small kind of everyday details of life to kind of comment on the larger structural issues like austerity or state neglect and some of the other things that you talk about.
I don't know. It seems quite natural, I think, because all of these macro issues affect your home life.
Yeah.
So if you sit long enough, you can draw the threads between one and the other, if you want to. But for me as well, like I'm a feminist. A lot of these like characters come from a really feminist perspective, and it's, for me, a woman's life, a woman's work is mundane. It's boring. Do you know? And it's often kind of unheard, or there's a lack of respect about what we do and how we make friendships and how we exist. But that's not how I see the women in my life. I see them as fabulous. So a lot of it's about, to me, it's political, just to portray these women like a barmaid, or, in Exiles, or the lassies, as she's got an alcohol addiction, and it's like to portray them as like you would a queen or like a really strong character. I think in Scotland we sort of pathologise like the bad boy, like a lot of Scottish literature's like the Begbie archetype, or a certain type of working class guy. And see, when you've known men like that, it's pretty damaging, Like
it's not a glamorous kind of portrayal that you see. Yeah.
No, it's not fun. So to me, it's like, without kind of rubbish and that, because that's also part of our reality. It's just that I always wanted to provide a contrast. Let's not focus on the broken sort of working class Scotsman, because that's insulting too.
Yeah. It's a stereotype that I think is used and is played out in kind of UK-wide media, isn't it? I remember like when we were kids, kind of there was always that token alcoholic Scottish guy on the bill or in the hospital and casualty or whatever it was. These kind of big TV programs back in the day. And that's just the way it was portrayed. Yeah.
Aye, totally. And it's like, So I suppose like a lot of the way I deal with these things is just to ignore them. Like just say I'm not that I'm going to pretend that that doesn't exist, and I'll just write a totally different thing, or I'll try
Yeah.
to.
When you're writing, do you start off with a kind of an idea of what sort of topics you want to tackle, or are you focusing in on the person and all that other stuff kind of comes along as you explore their journey?
I don't actually know. I think it depends. I think it starts at the person,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll like have a real. I mean, it's pretty wanky, but I have a real kind of thought about theory and like the kind of sort of sociological bent I want to take. And I'll read like things that are relevant to what I've written and try and get that perspective,
Yeah.
and then weave it into the story that way. When I wrote Confessionals, I was really into. I wouldn't say into, but I'd been reading things like the Scum Manifesto and stuff like that, like really kind of hardline feminist literature. And it really made me kind of think about like women's bodies as a kind of vessel that's always under threat.
Yeah.
And although a lot of that I would kind of maybe reject or say like we maybe need to be a bit more diplomatic about it, it helped me add, I think, to that feeling of pressure the character was under. So yeah, I'll start with the character and then I'll get really introspective about it and start building it out that
Start
way.
looking at those themes as well. Yeah, and what's bonkers about Confessionals, I think, as well, is I think you said at the start it was written sort of a decade ago, but I think the themes that are in there certainly haven't got any easier or better for people to navigate, at all. No matter it's Confessionals, I saw a post you put up the other day. You still got some copies of that you're able to sell to people if they do want to.
Yeah, I do. I've got
Yeah,
copies of that and
yeah.
Exiles.
I'll put links up to where people can contact you and stuff in the show notes. But would you mind reading a little poem for us? If you've
Sure,
got
no,
something there, that'd be
no,
great.
no problem. I did have something there to
Yeah,
find.
no worries. Take your time.
Um, Nettles. Green folds a glass bowl, steam welcomed, like hands clutching from evangelical bubbles in the pan below. We whitewash in a glass stove. Wooden spoon stirred wine sip, just a nip to bring things to the boil. As a child, I clambered hedgerows, white socked and sunblocked with tall tails and ponytails swinging, kissing farts through blades of grass as if to trick the birds to singing. And dock leaves rubbed on raspberry stings as the sun set on a sulphur evening. And then in loops, my walking boots stood stomping near 40 on Slieve Moor. Boulders sloped for the damp shells of haunted houses. A strand coiled below my wind-bitten hands. A nip of nettles slipped through fabric stinging. Coral lipped as my camera framed sheep. A warm rash in that distant vista. I was in Ireland the first time I heard how boiling nettles took the sting from their hostile heirs, mulched to slurp straight from stockened hands, picking leaves from supple plants, ripe for soup or buttered champ. It's a flavour spread now check-sped to the plates and bourgeois palates of sash-windowed, gig-served steady fingers manicured as a brickwork in a Dublin eatery. But further down that road, a mother's limbs flopped a ditch side, slimy, cold, and socket-jawed. Glass-eyed, ribs poked like teeth in a fishbone comb, basket-legged, cement babe swaddled in arms with nothing to suckle but a stomach full of stones. A blue mouth froth framed only by the green tones, a sickly nettles. So when hunger and bombs were dropped on Gaza, I was couch-stuck, sinking blankets up, watching a TV chef stir emerald salt and water in a whitewashed kitchen island. My tongue swollen, cheeks puffed, throat red and nettle stung, silent the way that they are when they always call it famine.
Thank you for that, Victoria. Wow. Some of the lines in there are jaw dropping. That's amazing. It started off with that kind of like amazing sort of childhood memory. I was thinking, I can relate to that. That's the same sort of thing, and then boom, what an ending! Taking it straight up to like what's going on with Gaza, and yeah, that use of the word famine, which they've got a fucking cheek to bandy about, don't they? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's that from? That book, is that from a collection, or is that where's the poem from?
It's from a collection that I'm working on at the moment for release next year.
Okay.
So it's kind of standalone at the moment, but it's part of a bigger tapestry.
Oh, excited to hear more about that, definitely. Oh, thank you for that. When I was doing a bit of research prepping for this, there's a lot of the stuff, a lot of your work I was familiar with. And actually, it made me think, sorry, I'm diverting here. I realised that the first time I saw you perform poems was actually at the now defunct Jupiter Rising Festival at Jupiter Artland, and I was sat incredibly hungover with my wife, and the kids were off running around, and it was part of it was at the Stellar Quines had you were there, your son was there as well, I think, sitting off the side, and it was just this beautiful kind of sunny morning. Everyone was kind of slightly woozy from the night before, and there's a phenomenal kind of panel of poets and writers and speakers. But yeah, that festival's sadly no longer with us. But yeah,
it's a shame. I remember that day well. I remember it was like Catherine Joseph and Hannah Lavery and things
that's
on that.
right.
So
Yeah,
good.
it was at like 10 in the morning as well. Yeah.
You did well to actually make it, to be fair.
It was really, I felt like I had to drag myself up to do something, definitely. But it was, it was a magic festival. It was great. But so yeah, that was the first time I saw you, and I kind of saw you perform at that. I knew bits and bobs from kind of online, and then kind of went back and bought various bits and bobs, which was great. But one of the things that I haven't sort of dug into, which I'd really intrigued to know a bit more about, was the Tristan Thorns project that you did a couple of years back. And when I was reading about it yesterday, it kind of shone a bit of a light on some of the societal double standards that we have. And in this case, you were exploring the legacy of Robert Burns, but without ignoring the grim bits. I was at the Burns Museum down in Ayrshire with my family not that long ago, and I knew lots about Burns, but like everyone, I totally ignored the fact that he was about to go and take a job on a slave plantation. And, you know, my dad was a huge Burns fan when he was alive. And again, that never came up. You know, he idolised him and he spoke about him all the time. We never paid any attention to that. So yeah, Tristan Thorns, exploring Burns' legacy without ignoring the grim bits. Tell me more about that.
So that was a project that was pulled together by the Scottish Poetry Library. It was myself, Jeanette Ayachi, and Morag Campbell.
Oh, fab.
It was a great thing. And Susie Briggs as well. She was part of it, but digitally because it was still during COVID. So it was a great thing to be part of anyway. Like I love all those women's writing, so I was quite humbled.
Phenomenal, yeah.
So the idea was that we were to approach Burns from an alternative perspective. And I also went to that museum because, to be honest, I don't know that much about Burns other than I'm not keen. So I thought I need to actually try and understand this guy or understand what it would be coming from and what really, I think they were wanting us to take it from a sort of feminist perspective, but I remember that, is it Peter Housen, the painting that's in the museum of kind of sort of slave trade stuff, and I just thought that's just disgusting. And that idea that everybody would be involved in stuff like that at the time, I think, because that's something we often hear banded about Burns, oh, he was a man of the time. Well, actually, no, he had autonomy. He chose to do things that I think reflect his character. And I wanted to just write a wee bit about that. Like, what was he thinking? Why would he do that? And why do we ignore that now? But that project actually got a lot of heat.
Did you get a lot of pushbacks from it?
Yeah, we did, but it was interesting because the general thing that came out from the other writers was that Burns was also an abuser, which he was. Which I actually hadn't said. I don't think, which I don't know why, because it's out of character for me. But I held back at that point. But yeah, we got like people were writing articles, kind of telling us that we were being disrespectful to like this fabulous man. I had somebody message me on Instagram telling me he was going to pop my lungs like an insect.
What?
Yeah. There's something about Robert Burns that brings out the absolute worst in people.
A bit like what you see the far right doing with Churchill, isn't it? Like kicking off when people sort of challenge the fact that he was a blatant kind of genocidal, racist lunatic.
Sure. And it's like, and it's not to say, so for me, it's always about, I mean, we'll leave Churchill for another day. I don't think you've got enough
No,
time
let's
to
not go there.
my
No,
Churchill
let's not.
rants. But
Bring it
I
back to Burns.
yeah. I think it's more about what it says about Scotland that we don't talk about that, the more it says about him as a person. It's hundreds of years ago.
Mm,
It doesn't necessarily matter to me what he did, but what matters to me is how we engage with it now. And the fact that we don't, I think, is more telling of a bigger problem. I wrote an article for, I'll not name them, but like a massive Scottish institution that is not Historic Scotland,
okay.
um, about this for an archive. And basically, they said to me, if you want paid, we'll need to rewrite it. Um,
Seriously?
yeah. And I used Alan Bissett. He'd done a fantastic documentary about Burns
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago for the BBC. And I'd watched that and I was like, oh, this is really good. And I used that as a jumping off point. I then made the mistake of quoting Liz Lockhead, who called him Weinsteinian, and then saying that if we ignore this, this reflects back in our politics. And I think they joined the dots and were like, no, you're not saying that. And I thought, I've never been censored more in Scotland than I have for criticising Robert Burns.
Well, how did that one play out? Like, did you like? Yeah, what happened when they said rewrite it or you're not getting paid?
Well, I told them that they didn't tell me what I should write
Mm-hmm.
and that they could pay me and they wouldn't publish it. So
Well
I
done,
was
you.
like, that's fine. I don't really care, but you're still paying me. But it was nasty, it was really, it was quite, there was a lot of sort of gaslighting involved, like you've not met up to your thing. And it went back on and on for months. And it was almost like trying to cover tracks that they had
Because
tried to, yeah.
sounds like they were scared about the impact on them and the reflection on them if it was published rather than actually supporting an independent bit of writing and critical thought.
Which is absolutely fine, Scott. And I would be totally understanding if they were like, thanks for writing that. And it never really went anywhere. I think a lot of writers have that experience where they create work for something and when the project actually comes to fruition, it's not suitable. I wouldn't have took that personally, but it was when they offered to rewrite it, I lost my mind, to be honest.
Good on you for standing your ground and not just going with it. Because I think one of the big things we've seen, with like you mentioned Gaza earlier on, I think there are certain people you would have assumed would have been quite vocal about
Yes.
situations that very blatantly haven't been. And I think in some cases there's obviously been pressure, being applied, whether it's from publishers or agents or the people that they work for outside of the writing world. That's the silence has been deafening when it comes to some of those kind of big topics. But the Burns one, that's fascinating because, to be honest, I've not really thought about it in that way at all. It's like, the kids still come home from school every year reciting Burns from Burns Day, but that's almost like a cultish take on it, isn't it? And a kind of refusal to acknowledge that. I wonder what that's about. What it says about our national psyche that we're unable to kind of see past the Auld Lang Syne and whatever else.
I think it's a very Scottish thing to go, right, that's rubbish, but we'll push on. Like that. I think that happens a lot across our culture. Like we don't talk about what is shameful.
Mm.
And we don't talk about anything we're I think quite surface level at times.
Yeah.
And I think there's cultural reasons for that, and it plays out at once.
Definitely. I did have a chuckle when I saw you had an Instagram story up the other day calling out the bullshit around the pricing for the Oasis gigs. I was one of those idiots that sat for a whole day kind of just pressing refresh. Me and all my mates had a group chat trying to get tickets. We were at prime Oasis age. I'm 44 now, so we were like there at the kind of peak of it all and failed miserably on getting tickets, and a couple of the guys paid to go and see them. But yeah, 500-600 quid for a gig ticket. It was but well done you for calling that one out as well.
I need to be honest, Scott, I called it out partly because I'm disgusted, but also because I'm butthurt. Like, if I had the money, I would have paid the money. but it doesn't mean I'm not annoyed that I was expected to.
Yeah.
Because I also love Oasis, and I'd always had in my head that when my boy was old enough, if Oasis reformed, I would take him. That would be a thing. And we couldn't get tickets, and it's funny how that played out because in the end, I was like, we had money for this. So I said, what do you want to do with it instead? And he was like, I want to go and see Fontaines DC a couple of times. I was like, oh God, like 3 times in the one tour, do we need to do that? But in the end, I was really glad of it because I realised that they were as relevant to him as Oasis were to me in the 90s.
Massively.
And that it was just nice to see him engage in something new, something that was, I mean, at Fontaine's DC are quite nostalgic, to be fair, but it wasn't a rehashed thing of somebody's youth. It was something happening now.
Yeah.
So maybe there was a lesson in that maybe some stuff's just better left 30 years
Yeah.
ago. But yeah, that's so. I tried to. We were all day, every computer open, and
Totally. I think
but
because neither of us got tickets, we can agree that it's better left 30 years ago. Yeah.
sure. But I can also. I don't know, Scott, if you were at the Stone Roses reunion gigs. Did you go to them?
No, I didn't actually. No, again, would have loved to, and yeah, didn't get tickets. But yeah.
So I went to a couple of them. I'm slightly too young to have went to the Stone Roses when they were around the first time. And I remember standing in like Etihad Stadium, and there was all these sponsored by Carlsberg signs, and I was thinking, I don't know if this is what this band was about. Like,
It's definitely not what that band was about at the start. There's loads of footage of Ian Brown outwardly slating bands that were about that kind of stuff,
yeah, yeah. So I think these reunions. I mean, I loved the gigs. I was glad that I saw them, but I think that they come back as something else anyway. It's
Yeah,
not.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. What are you working on just now? What's kind of going on for you?
So I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, because there's like stuff to be launched and things. But I'm
Okay.
working on a publication for a really exciting new kind of indie press project. That should be out in 2027, my bit, but there's loads of really fantastic people lined up before that. So I'm really excited about that. I think that we need more kind of grassroots opportunities for writers
Definitely.
that are like open minded. So I'm glad to be part of that. And it's really loosely about housing in Glasgow, like throughout the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in the sort of housing struggle stuff, particularly the now, the likes of living rent and the kind of push for rent caps and things like that. I find it really encouraging. So I wanted to sort of imagine that in a sort of bigger piece of writing, I think.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. To look forward to that. Speaking about the kind of housing in Glasgow, what was your take on the fire last week? They kind of lost a big old building in the city centre.
Oh no. I'm going to have to try and I've actually wrote a bit of this answer out, Scott, because I want to be a bit diplomatic. Because, I mean, it's sad. It's an old building. I feel really sad for the businesses that were in it.
Yeah.
Because the impression I'm getting is most of it is like sole traders who have like,
Seems to be. Yeah.
they've pumped their whole life into it, and how quickly it disappears, and they're now going to have to go through this whole insurance thing. And so I really feel for that. I do feel like it's part of a bigger problem in Glasgow where the old architecture has been left to rot in a way that it's not, it, if it does go on fire or whatever, it just goes up in flames. There's whole issues, I'm not too up on them, but like about who owns certain buildings and like who's responsible for maintenance of them, and I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
citywide thing. But also like regeneration, and I'm like saying that in inverted commas, has been like a decades long policy in Glasgow, from the minute they built the Kingston Bridge through like Anderson and things like that, where communities don't matter in the shape of progress. Like I come from a scheme in what would be considered Greater Easterhouse, which has now been regenerated like 3 times in my lifetime.
Wow.
Do you know, and people repeatedly, houses get knocked down, left when I was younger in the 90s, they were left derelict for years, knocked down, people moved in, the community broken up, it all starts again. So I'm a wee bit like sad for this building, as in the workers that work, but also nobody seems to want to address the issue of like that's how the council works. The council couldn't wait to knock down the facade of that building. Like the day later, they'd also deemed it unsafe and they weren't going to save any of it. And I just can't wait to see the student flats that are going to be put up in this space.
Which seems to be what pops up in any open space, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's just a building to me, but it's the lives and what that policy impacts on the city, as in the people that live there. That's what worries me. I
hadn't even thought about that from that angle of like sort of shining a light on that kind of more deep-rooted policy problems of, you know, the council not doing what they're meant to do, or almost pitting communities against kind of capitalism, I suppose, isn't it? And always taking the shortcut to make money rather than actually what's going to pull people together.
Sure. I mean, I think I vaguely remember the Forge opening in Parkhead. Like where the old Iron Forge used to be, and I remember it because it had a McDonald's, and that was like really cosmopolitan for us in the 80s. But like, nobody thought about the long-term ramifications of replacing a steel forge with a shopping centre.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the minute the industry fails, they then replace it with something that demands buying power in an area where there probably isn't much buying power to start with. And then what they do is they put an Asda there, which kills every shop in Parkhead Cross. And that's like, I mean, people in Pollock will feel the same. People, maybe not Castlemilk because they won't build a supermarket in Castlemilk. But these to me are bigger issues, as in like, what is it like to actually live in this city? Yeah. And it's not great at the moment. It's not great.
Yeah, and you know, that's been played out in other cities. I obviously lived just outside Edinburgh, and Edinburgh's got this kind of almost Machiavellian thing of like putting the city centre is all basically one big sort of tourist park, and then all the communities where there's sort of social deprivation and greater need are all pushed up out of sight, out of mind, and therefore don't get anything. You know, it's bonkers, but yeah, you've got to hope that sometimes some of these things will shine some lights on that policy. I've read some really good writing from people that have tried to pick it apart. There's some good folk on Substack doing some stuff that are, you know, talking about it and really asking some of those big questions. So maybe we're at a tipping point. He says optimistically. Yeah.
I was watching last night on BBC Scotland, there was a documentary about tourism in Scotland. And there was like a segment from Mike Small that does Bella Caledonia. Mm-hmm. He was talking about Edinburgh and the development in it and the sort of the fringe and where that money kind of goes to and how they judge the success of the fringe. And it was really interesting. And I feel like that, which Edinburgh's been kind of suffering for a long time now, is maybe beginning to spread outwards into the other cities in Scotland. So I'm glad that people are beginning to try and have that conversation in a public sphere.
Yeah, that sounds good. What was can you remember what the programme was called? That sounds good.
I can't remember. No. Do you know, I'll look it up and message you.
Yeah, do that and I'll stick it in the show notes, definitely. That sounds interesting and ties together a lot of the bits and bobs we've spoken about. What's the best place for people to find out what you're up to follow you and see what's coming up?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Victoria McNulty Poet. That's probably the best place. And I have a Substack as well, which is linked in my Instagram.
Great.
I'm in the slow process of setting up a website and maybe doing a bit more with my Substack. Mm-hmm. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll get the notifications of that when that comes about.
Fab. Nice one, Victoria. Listen, thank you so much for your time today, for the chatting. It's been really interesting. I think there's loads of stuff there that builds on previous episodes, things I've chatted through with other guests, and as also we've dropped a few names in there of people that I would love to chat to in the future as well, so hopefully it might open a few doors in that way as well. But yeah, huge thank you. I'll put show notes together so people can get in touch and put all the relevant links in, but cheers for that.
Brilliant, no worries.